Alright, so we knew you were a commie bastard, but do you have to drag it out of the closet in our faces? What you mean? The shirt? You mean the hat? Which, if you can see it, translates into Udarna Dvinachachi Piataletka, shock worker of the 12th five-year plan. Well, if I wore a cap or I had a shirt with a $100 bill on it emblazoned with "In God We Trust," deifying the national currency, you'd have no trouble with that, would you? So what? At least that will stand for gulags and holodomors of mass murder. Well, this symbol doesn't either. And those nasty things you comfort yourself with are not the real reason most of you hate this symbol, if you're honest. You hate it because of what it does plainly show. Symbols of labor. The hammer of manufacturing labor, the sickle of agricultural production. The class bias is so evident when I get into, let's call them conversations with a lot of people, circular reasoning like anti-racism equals anti-white, a mantra I heard long before it became popular on YouTube. So I'm going to discuss the value of labor as a form of capital and not a commodity. And in doing so, I will probably use a lot of big words. So to lubricate the plate, I'll probably try to kill off the rest of this kvass bottle, you might remember. So anyway, let's get started. The basic premise is that labor is the most concrete expression of our humanity. Our ability to transform nature, to grow our food and construct our living environment. The working tools of human labor don't need deification because they show confidence in humanity's ability to meet its needs through the rational application of physical and mental processes, to transform the natural world into its own purposes. And even so, even without the deification, aren't there respectable old proverbs like God helps those who help themselves, idleness is the devil's workshop, whereas God gave you a brain and two hands for a reason, so use them, and etc. Not to just sit back and collect profit because you own a brain or own a pair of hands, because such reasoning is both retarded and useless. So is hiring someone to use their brains and their hands for your profit, as opposed to mutual equal benefit. But that's the way our present capitalist society is engineered. Labor being the bedrock of human ability, it follows that mere ownership of things external to our person is totally incidental. If ownership of land, tools, and resources was vitally necessary for productivity, then no one could perform productive labor without owning one's own means of production and owning what he produced with them. Since we currently don't live in such a society but have high productivity anyway, I defy you to show me where productivity must be based on such ownership. Were that true, the great capitalist empires of our time, or socialist ones, could not have been possible. Yeah, but it's private ownership that has been the most productive, Azov. Well, besides the fact that I just logically demonstrated that ownership is not a necessary consideration in the actual productive process, communal production was quite the norm in human society, at its most basic level, so that one could restore the value of labor without the state either. So, the state is just a convenient tool itself, no worse inherently than any other. You can use it to dig a garden or dig a grave. Like all tools of production, the use depends on the character of the user. Okay? It coordinates land, resources, and labor, and distributes the product. The idea was that the state, as a public body in a democratic society, would do more so equitably. High volume and fast turnover efficiency is the hallmark of the coupon clipper, not necessarily the best way to manage the resources or distribute the production of society. Even the term society has become a nasty word to those who deify property and its symbols. Logically so to them, but that's a different video. But even public or state ownership of the means of production and distribution isn't necessary to give equity to labor in a just human society. Even though financial capital has no productive value, it's merely the parasitic accumulated labor turned into liquid form, currency, applied to future productive value, because it's hard to store hard commodities by the millions in a bank for exchange, or it's based on real estate, the market value of land, which is determined only by its potential for productive use. Again, ownership is not necessary for productive use. only as a vehicle to enrich the owner of real estate at the expense of the social value produced on it and of those who produce it on his real estate. But even at that, a truly democratic political order could at least begin a just resolution without the complete confiscation of private productive property, not always identical, by the way, to personal property for your own use alone, like your house, car, clothes, misses, etc., involving no demands on outside help. Capital property is the value of the social product of all of us, appropriated by private parties. So you could have a democratic polity where labor is given political value in proportion to its social value, even within the confines and context of capitalism, because the labor and time of the worker are his capital that he brings to the social construct of exchange we call the market. The worker has the right to have the reward of his investment every bit as the bank or a factory owner, more so with justice. But the worker couldn't have a job if not for the patronage of the master class. And again, that's crap. Not if we had an economic and political order that wasn't based on a master class, as though it were a master race believing anti-racism equals anti-white. The concept of intellectual property that's taken hold in the last generation or so is proof of this. It's applied in the usual undemocratic and confiscating way of financial capitalism to take ideas belonging to society, combining them in a certain way for the market profit of one party only. But it's based on the same idea that a process of thought is inherently the right of its possessor to use for his benefit, as is his labor and his time. The value of labor and time is based on their usefulness for production, which in turn determine the value of the finished product itself. In a truly democratic market system, the worker would set his rate of labor and the value of his time, not the capitalist buyer. After all, when you go buy something as a consumer yourself, do you get to set the price you're willing to pay? Not in our free market system, do you? So let's apply that to Mr. Bourgeois, Mr. Employer. We, the workers in, say, the electrical trade, have decided our members won't work for you at your preferred rate. You pay us what the value of our product is really worth based on our labor and time, or we'll just get together and produce for the market ourselves as an incorporated cooperative. There's nothing new in this idea at all, but it's necessary to go over this basic fact of human production because one of the first things private finance capital did was to so subjugate the ownership of labor value on the market in its own favor, so as to make it virtually impossible for the worker to organize, to produce as an artisan, or collectively for his own benefit based on his property right as owner of his labor and time. The owner of real estate and accumulated finance, dead labor in Marx's term, are made out to be the only real holders of capital, when actually they're just parasites who have pulled off one of the greatest intellectual swindles in history. Comparable to, say, in the Middle East, where settlers who claim some abstract mystical right to certain real estate drive off the current possessors in one of the planet's most egregious land swindles of the time. The old rule of possession being 9/10 of the law is conveniently ignored by the powerful, whether you're a worker in our global workshop or an Arab squatter in a refugee camp for the dispossessed and the displaced. That's why to have even a truly democratic market society would require a revolution. And in making a revolution, it's always tempting to go to the full mile. I'll go all the way, in this case, to just abolish private finance capital and private ownership and the private capitalist and square the circle. But at any rate, no democratic society is possible unless the worker has control over his labor, his time, and freely sets the value of both. Since that sets him at odds with those for whom property is only finance, only real estate, class conflict is embedded in the capitalist system as now constructed, no matter how cleverly it's hidden behind democratic or religious rhetoric, worker benefits, or outsourcing to other fields of labor. Just as the buyer and seller are enemies in the marketplace every time you go to the store, so is the worker and the employer in a private society on the same level. On the same level. Hello? Who? Milton Friedman. I thought I might get a call from you. So, you've been playing pinochle with Pinochet again, huh? Is he still losing to Hitler? Anyway, you just want to remind our viewers that money is what makes the world go around because of the things it buys. Well, should it buy people? Because when you buy a man's labor and his time, you're buying him, even if by the hour is a rental fee. And with the minimum wage being what it is, we see what value a day of honest labor and hard work really has in a capitalist society, based on finance and real estate. Why any working person who politically support a party based on your theories is a complete moron. It just eludes me altogether. What? That just proves why ownership of finance and real estate must dominate labor, because the worker doesn't have sense enough to know his own value. Yeah, well, I see your point, but if that were really true, you wouldn't need Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United, which defends a group funded by finance capital, or Homeland Security to protect you from the terrorism of labor. Now, would you?